Hello and welcome. Here are ways to become a supporter of the channel. Thank you and enjoy.
3, 2, 1.
American currently living abroad, what is one time that made you realize that America really messed you up?
So I started my new job in the Netherlands. This was 3 years ago, and I was going through the company policy the first week. And I got to the section about leave, and they have a holiday leave, like PTO, and then they had sick leave in two different areas. And I was reading about sick leave, and I turned to my coworker, and I was like, I don't understand. Like, it talks about like the requirements for sick leave and like doctor notes like after 3 days, but how many sick days do we get a year? And she's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, how many are they? It doesn't say. She's like, it's just if you're sick, you're out. I'm like, I don't understand. She's like, it's unlimited. It's just if you're sick, you take a sick day. She was confused. I was shocked. There's a moment I realized we're fucked up in America and how we deal with people being sick with work.
American currently living abroad, what is one time that made you realize that America really messed you up?
So I've been living in Spain for the last 2 years, and a little over a year ago, I was uninsured. I didn't have health insurance for about 2 months, and unbeknownst to me, in that short period of time, I got sick enough to where I needed to go to urgent care. And when I arrived, I explained to the women at the front desk that I didn't have insurance and that I would be paying for everything out of pocket, and they were aghast. They were just like, oh my god, it's going to be so expensive, you shouldn't have to pay all that amount. And I was like, look, I don't have insurance and my face is the size of a football and I can hardly open my mouth. I clearly need to see a doctor. And the total for my urgent care visit, along with 8 weeks of antibiotics, was €100. And that was expensive to them. And I was, in my brain, prepared to spend 6-7 times that amount for that one visit and for that one round of medicine.
American currently living abroad, what is one time that made you realize that America really messed you up?
So I grew up in southern Indiana, and I moved to London, England. So I just moved to England, and I made a lot of new friends. So I go to a party, this was like 3 years ago. And let's say one of my friends he drank too much water. And all my friends were taking care of him, including myself, and all of a sudden one of them goes, hey, we gotta call an ambulance. And I was like, no, dude, like, do you know how much money that costs? Like, he just drank too much water, he's gonna be fine. And right when I said that, everyone looked at me and said, mate, what are you talking about? And I was like, dude, the ambulance is gonna cost like $3,000. And that was the moment I realized that England had free healthcare.
If you're an American currently living abroad, what is one time that made you realize that America really...
So shout out to all my American expats who shared a response video to this girl's question. I did too, because I'm currently living in Ireland. But what I noticed in the comment section of all these videos that is hilarious time and time again is the amount of Americans who are pressed. And these are the same Americans who will be like, oh, if you don't like it here, then leave. And we did. It's the fact that they're in the comments trying to discredit the reasons why we've left America. Like, how are you going to tell me, someone who was born and raised in America all my life, that what I experienced there wasn't real? Like, no, America doesn't exploit the working class. No, America doesn't have a policing issue, a race issue. No, America doesn't have a problem with guns and mass shootings. I can't tell if you're mad that we're thriving outside of America or America's being exposed. Either way, America's not great for everybody, and that's a fact.
If you're an American currently living abroad, what is one time that made you realize that America really...
I knew America was fucked up when I was living in Paris with my host mom and I got sick. 24-hour bug, common cold, whatever it was, something super simple that you normally don't get medicine for if you're an American because that shit's expensive. And she goes, okay, I'm going to call the doctor. And I was like, no, it is 10 p.m. on Halloween. Like, there is not a human being coming here to, like, take care of me now. Like, if I need, I will go to the doctor tomorrow. And she was like, no, like, the doctor will come. And I was like, doctors don't do house calls. They don't come if you need them at 10 p.m. Like, you got to wait till the doctor's office opens or, like, go to the hospital. And she goes, no. And I was like, well, okay, whatever. It's probably really expensive. Like, I can't afford to have a doctor come here at, like, 10 p.m. on a Friday night. Which is probably €75, and your school's gonna cover it, like your student insurance. And I was like, oh, America's really fucked up. Okay, yeah, sure.
What is one time that made you realize that America really messed you up?
I was studying abroad in Germany, and that winter I broke my foot playing soccer. At first, I didn't go to the hospital because I'm so used to a shitty healthcare system, but then I was reminded that I paid $200 for a full year of full coverage health insurance. Fuck yeah. So I went to the hospital and the doctor was x-raying my foot. I asked, Wie viele ist das X-ray? Huh? How much is the X-ray? Yeah, I understood you, but where did you get this idea that we would charge for an X-ray? America? Really? How much do they cost over there? Like $700 to $1,400, depending on what you get? Wow. Well, here in Germany, we don't charge for fucking pictures. My God, that is verrückt. My knee feels funny too.
I'm currently living abroad. What is one time that made you realize that America really messed you up?
Oh my gosh, such a great question. I have so many. The one that sticks out of my mind right now is the first time I celebrated the 4th of July and the Kiwis were like, oh, happy 4th of July. And I'm like, yeah, suckers. We broke away from the Queen a long time ago and we have freedom and blah, blah, blah. And they were like, hold on. What freedoms don't we have? And why is it bad that other countries work together to protect each other and help each other? And America's always talking about freedom and what freedoms do you have that we don't have? And I was like, hold up. All this rhetoric that I was told my whole life, the land of the free, we need to fight for our freedom, and it's such a value in the American society. And when you think about how many countries are just as free, where does this freedom value come from? I mean, it came back from the Revolutionary War, but hello, there's a lot of countries that are free. It was eye-opening.
American currently living abroad. What is one time that made you realize that America really messed you up?
Did y'all know that in other countries, they can go to the pharmacy and actually get what they need? I live in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia right now, and I went to the pharmacist and I was like, hi, I think I gotta have like a UTI. Like, do you have any pain medicine, any cranberry? And she's like, why don't I just give you antibiotic? And I was like, then I go back and I'm like, hi, I'm going to South Africa next week, like on safari, like any good, mosquito repellent? And she's like, girl, you want anti-malarials? And then I get bold with it, right? I go in there, on another occasion and I'm like, I'm back, I'm waiting for my birth control, like to come from the US. Like it's taking a while, prescriptions and doctors and all that. And she literally threw the birth control at me. Amazing.
American currently living abroad. What is one time that made you realize that America really messed you up?
One of my favorite questions. All right, so last summer I had to go see a doctor, get an x-ray, and something else. I don't remember. And this was all in the same visit. And I go downstairs, go pay my bill. And I asked the lady, I was like, hey, where do I go pay? And she told me and then she just said they'll mail it to me. And then I was like, all right, do you by any chance know how much this is going to cost me? Because in my head, I'm freaking out because this would cost me thousands at home. And she looked at me and she's like, between 13 and 16 euros. And I'm just like, and the best part was I went to go see another doctor about 3 months ago for something else. And I realized I never got the bill for the last visit. I asked the lady, I was like, do I have to pay for my last visit? Because I never got a bill. She looked it up and she's just like, no, you don't got to pay. I'm like, oh, okay, America. Oh.
If you're an American currently living abroad, what is one time that made you realize that America really...
So during the first lockdown, we have an elderly neighbor and we would go and check in on her every once in a while and like get her groceries if she needed. And progressively, she started not be able to breathe very well. And we knew it wasn't COVID because she had it before. But like at one point it was like she couldn't even get to the door without like literally not being able to breathe and having to sit down. So my partner decided that we needed to call an ambulance for her and get her to the hospital pronto. And when he told me that he was going to call an ambulance, the first thing that I said was, are you sure? Can she afford an ambulance? Like we could just drive her. And it wasn't until my partner looked at me like, and that it clicked that, oh, that's not a worry here. And then I went upstairs and cried because it really smacked me in the face that as Americans, we are conditioned to not worry about someone's health first, but to worry about whether or not they can financially afford to see a doctor and get help.
If you're an American currently living abroad, what is one time that made you realize that America really...
So I live in Stockholm, Sweden, but I'm from Nashville, and I used to have the best job ever in Nashville, but I was always paranoid about getting fired for no reason, because that happened to a lot of people at my company. People get fired and no one would say why. Like, they would just drop in the group chat and be like, this person's not with us anymore. We'd be like, okay. So when I was applying for jobs in Sweden, I would like tell the employer, I'd be like, oh, job security is really important to me because I don't want to just like show up one day and find out that I'm fired. They were like, what are you talking about? Like, that's illegal. I was like, huh? And long story short, it's like completely impossible to fire someone like in Sweden. The company has to prove that you either killed somebody or that like employing you will make them bankrupt. It's like so much work to try and fire somebody. But you can quit whenever you want depending on your contract. But yeah, all my employers were like shocked to hear that I could get fired tomorrow and they didn't have to tell me why. Thanks, Sweden.
American currently living abroad, what is one time that made you realize that America really messed you up?
I've lived abroad for a little over a year, and coming back for the holidays, I have really come to realize that the food in this country is garbage. Since leaving the US, I have lost about 40 pounds, and I have not tried to lose weight. I haven't been conscious that I'm losing weight. It just has naturally fallen off of me because food in other countries is not overprocessed. It's not packed with sugar and preservatives and all of the things that are in the food here. And since being back, even for the short amount of time that I've been here, I have found it extremely difficult to maintain my weight, even though I'm not overeating. I'm eating basically the same diet I was eating abroad. It's simply the way the food is processed. So moral of the story, try eating organic as much as possible. This food is killing you.
If you're an American currently living abroad, what is one time that made you realize that America...
So I don't live abroad anymore, but for half of 2018, I lived in Germany, and I have so many stories. The town that I lived in had like a main plaza area, and there was a cafe in that plaza, so a couple of my other American friends and I decided to try it out one day, and there was a construction site nearby. We heard a really loud bang, and, you know, we kind of assumed that someone had fired a gun, and so we, like, ducked for cover, and then we were looking around frantically, trying to find, like, a place that we could run to or hide to get out of the situation, and then we realized that no one had shot a gun. No, it was a loud bang from the construction site. That's it. That's all it was. We'd been speaking in English, and we all have really obvious American accents, so all the Germans around us gave us these really sad looks, like, oh, these poor, poor Americans.
What is one time that made you realize that America really messed you up?
It's not current, but when I was studying in the UK, one day I really needed to see a doctor. But I didn't know how to access care, I didn't know what my insurance situation was like, so I just went to work. And eventually I was in so much pain that I burst into tears, and my boss pulled me aside. And he was like, what's up? And I was like, I really need to see a doctor, but I don't know how to access care here. I don't know if I can afford it. And he was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Go down the street to the hospital. And I argued with him. And he was like, no, just trust me. Just go to the hospital. So I went, and I was like clutching my like student ID in my hand, my passport. And I was like trying to remember how much I had in my bank account, like checking. And I got called back to the doctor. He was like, yep, this is what's wrong with you. Pick up your prescription on the way out. And I was like, I'm sorry, do you know how much it's going to be? And he said, I don't know, maybe 8 pounds. I was like, I'm sorry, 8? He was like, yeah, I don't think it's ever more than that. The receptionist kept laughing at me because I didn't feel comfortable leaving without paying somebody, and I kept asking and asking if I owed anybody any money.
It's one time that made you realize that America really messed you up.
So I'm American. I no longer live abroad, but I lived in Seoul, South Korea for 12 years. And when I first got there, back in 2004, I got really, really sick. But my insurance hadn't kicked in yet, and I didn't really want to go to the doctor because I thought it was going to take a long time like it would here in the States, and I thought it was going to be very, very expensive because if you drop in anywhere in the States for critical care, you're going to probably pay about $100 for being seen and then the prescriptions. But finally, I just went to the doctor, and it took 45 minutes from start to finish, including filling the prescriptions, and it cost me $8 to see the doctor without insurance and $5 for my antibiotics because I had bronchitis. So you know what, America? You're doing it all wrong, and I have no sympathy for people who cry about the threat of socialized healthcare. Thank you.
And currently living abroad, what is one time that made you realize that America really messed you up?
Oh, I've got a couple. So I'm from Los Angeles, and now I live in Austria. And basically when I first started working here, they were like, you get 25 days vacation, Fridays off early, and if you're sick, don't come into work. And I was just like, I was floored. Because in the US, you only get 10 days vacation and like 5 sick days, and you don't get Fridays off early. You better work your ass until it's 9 p.m. On top of all of that, all my friends here have like 2 masters, 3 PhDs, etc., 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 because education here is actually free. Amazing. What an amazing concept. In addition, I have yet to see a large homeless community out in the open here in Austria because the government actually offers some social support. A lot of social support. In LA, you have villages, streets, blocks full of homeless people because our government doesn't care about us. And here, people like don't measure their worth off the car they drive.
Time that made you realize that America really messed you up.
So I spent about 4 years in Berlin, Germany, working in advertising. And coming from New York, where my first 8 years in the industry, I just, you don't take vacation. You just don't really do that. Well, I had to have a sit down with the CEO of my company and the head of HR where they took my laptop and took my work phone and told me I could not come back to the office for 3 weeks because I had to use my vacation time. They were afraid that I was going to sue the company for not being allowed to take my vacation time. So they made sure that I literally could not work. Imagine that happening in the US. Someone literally taking your computer and your work phone away and say, go, come back in 3 weeks, enjoy your vacation. Honestly, Europe has a lot going for it that I wish Americans would understand.
American currently living abroad, what is one time that made you realize that America really messed you up?
I'm not living abroad anymore, but I was from 2010 to 2011. I was living in Uppsala, Sweden, which is like about 45 minutes north of Stockholm. And this was before any major civil unrest was happening in the country or Trump or anything. This was like 10 years ago. I was out with friends and we started talking about how this Swedish girl happened to have cancer and how it's completely taken care of by their government. All of her health care, all of her bills are paid for. The odds are that she will definitely get over cancer. So I go up to my 2 friends, one from Australia, one from Canada, and I say, oh my God, you guys, did you hear? She has cancer and the government's completely taking care of all of her bills. Isn't that amazing? Like, oh my God. And then my friends replied, Sabrin, you realize that you are the weird ones. Americans are the only ones that don't have that program. That was the first of many moments where I was embarrassed to be an American.
If you're an American currently living abroad, what is one time that made you realize that America really messed you up? I'll go first.
I live in Warsaw, Poland now, but I always stay in touch with what's happening in the US, and I happened to hear about that Las Vegas shooting when someone opened fire on a bunch of concert goers. And it was very tragic news, but that day I also went to the movies, so I was already in a kind of weird mental state. And when I left the movies, I got on the tram again in Warsaw and I saw this guy kind of being sketchy and acting weird in the last seat. I kept eyeing him the whole time and he had his jacket open and he was holding something inside. He was hiding it. And I thought, my first American thought was it's a gun or a knife or some kind of weapon and I need to move away as soon as possible. So I kept looking at him the whole ride and then he takes it out and it was a beer can. He was sipping it and hiding it during the tram ride. That's what happens in Poland. Not guns, not knives. And I started crying and laughing at the same time because that's when I realized, wow, that's messed up.
If you're an American currently living abroad, what is one time that made you realize?
I am back for round 2 on this one. So I just moved to Italy with my boyfriend who is Italian. We're watching a movie the other day where somebody is running away and they get shot. And I'm like, you know what? That's their fault. They didn't run in a zigzag. That's like the first thing they teach you, to run in a zigzag if somebody's pointing a gun at you. He pauses the movie and he looks at me and he goes, who taught you that? And I'm like, like teachers, adults, parents, like they teach you when you're young to run in a zigzag if somebody is pointing a gun at you. The sinking feeling I had when I realized that nobody ever had to teach him that when he was young, because that's not a problem here.
If you're an American currently living abroad, what is one time that made you realize?
So we live in Ireland and our oldest is in senior infants, which is the equivalent of the second half of kindergarten. She did kindergarten back in the States. And she came home from school one day and she said, Mommy, we had a drill today. And I go, oh, active shooter drill? No. Bomb threat? No. Mommy, it was a fire drill. Well, oh, okay. I mean, back home, she had active shooter drills every month in kindergarten. We get these phone calls and it'd say, oh, in accordance with Florida law, blah, 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 everything's gone back to normal. And I'm just sitting there thinking of my kid hiding in a bathroom with 30 other kindergartners and her poor teacher trying to keep all these kids quiet. I'm like, that's not normal here. That's something we got used to. because that's what America is. It's just one big active shooter drill.